Okay, the plan was to do some review of Yadaita, but I left my book downstairs. So let's start in a minor. Yadaita is definitely something to do review of. Chaim. Oh wow! Woo. Okay, as you can see from the front, Yud Yudalid Kislev. This was the way it worked. We've talked about this before, but it's important for people to understand. The Rebbe would say Maimarim. He said many Maimarim. But basically, the Rebbe stopped saying Maimarim in Tafshin Memches, 1988, after the passing of the Rebbe. Tzemach Tzedek also, interesting enough, changed the way he did things after the passing of his Rebbe. So then what would happen is the Rebbe would, and the Rebbe rarely did this before. The Rebbe started editing Maimarim, meaning who decided which Maimar? I assume it was the Rebbe, but might be Rav Yoel had an idea, I'm not sure. But the Rebbe, basically the Rebbe would give Rav Yoel a Maimar, Rav Yoel Khan, whose picture used to be up on the board here. His drawing was up on the board in this picture. And Rav Yoel would write up the Maimar, give it into the Rebbe, and it would go back and forth, and what would emerge is an edited Maimar. So we call that Muga, edited. When you look in many Maimarim, so you'll see at the top, Hanocha Bilti Muga. This is the, how would you say, Hanocha literally means to be placed down. Meaning this is what was written down, but it wasn't edited. Right? Now the Rebbe saw it go out. All those Maimarim that were printed and put in books, so the Rebbe saw what they printed. But the Rebbe didn't edit it in any way, shape, or form. So basically what the Rebbe said in the Maimar, that's what was printed. An edited Maimar is an edited work. So there can be things that the Rebbe didn't say when he said the Maimar that are included in the Maimar, things that are taken out of the Maimar. That's how you edit things. Right? So in Tafshin Mem, this started in Tafshin Mem Zayin, but then Mem Ches, Mem Tes, Nun Aleph, Nun Beis. So then the only Maimar in Tafshin Mem Tes, the Rebbe said two Maimarim. But the Maimarim that we got were all Mugadik Maimarim. Were all edited Maimarim. So that's why you see on the front page it says Kuntris Yud Dalet Kislev Tafshin Nun Beis. This is what was given out to the Chassidim for those 2 days, special days. We'll talk about obviously what those special days are. All right, but Kuntris would come out for the special days of the year. Kuntris is like a pamphlet. Right, and what would be there? So would be there is an edited Maimar. So if you look and turn the page, it says Pesach Davar. So it says Likras Yud Kislev. As we approach Yud Kislev, Yom HaGeula Admar Amsai, which is the day of freedom of the Mittler Rebbe. So the Mittler Rebbe got out of jail. He was jailed by the Russians, not the Soviets, the Russians. And the Yom Habar Yudalit Kislev, and the special day Yudalit Kislev, which it says Yom Nesuya Kreikris Admar Shlita Ima Rabbanis Etzatkanis Maris Chaya Mushka Shmos Seidin Schusi Again Aleinu, and Yudalit Kislev, which is the Rebbe's anniversary. Hinenu Meitzim La'or, we're putting out the Maimar Tibur Maska Poda besholom. Sha'amar Kreg Dush Admar Shlita Bizvadus, the Shabbos Pashas V'Yetze Yud Kislev Tafshin Chaf Beis. The Rabbi said this Maimar Tafshin Chaf Beis, 1962, actually 61. It was December 61. It hadn't turned to 62 yet. 30 years later, the Rebbe edited the Maimar and gave it out as an edited Maimar. Shekelol gam bira ba Maimar diber mas v'chol b'nayich limudei havai shamar kvish admar marait nishmas eden. It's also including an explanation of the Maimar, and we'll see this as we go later in the Maimar. Kol b'nayich limudei Hashem, which is a Maimar of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and what's unique about that mimer. So it says when the previous Rabbi said that mimer, Shabbos Parshas V'Yetzeh, Kriyas Achosin Shiyichya Torah, the Ufra for the Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe said a mimer the Shabbos before the Rebbe got married to his daughter, right? And also the night before the wedding. It's exactly the same mimer with a slight change. When we get to that mimer, we'll talk about that slight change. Very interesting. He added a story. Other than that, it was word for word. Right? Ubei b'yem beis v'yishlach laila shel chasna. Mal b'yeshivas tem chetimim b'Varsha, and it took place in Varsha. The Hamaimer Rishon, the Jewish Chasna, the first Maimer of Jewish Chasna. So this Maimer is based on two Maimers. One the Rebbe said, and one that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, and the Rebbe is discussing that Maimer. Now, this is an interesting Shabbos. I think we talked about this, but I'm not sure. It just came up a couple of weeks ago. Shabbos Parshas V'Yetzeh Yud Kislev, which is very interesting. Tavshin Chav Beis is very interesting Shabbos. The Rebbe forbringed, and Yud Kislev is the day that the Mittler Rebbe got out of jail. There's two major holidays of redemption in Kislev: Yud Kislev and Yud Tes Kislev. Yud Tes Kislev was the Alter Rebbe. Yud Kislev was the Mittler Rebbe, his son. He was also jailed by the Russians and then let out of jail on Yud Kislev, the day after his birthday, which is Tes Kislev, and he passed away before the following Yud Kislev. Passed away in Tes Kislev. He was born in Tes Kislev, passed away in Tes Kislev, and didn't celebrate the first Chag Geula because he passed away the day before. But the Mittler Rebbe said a mimer, the Russians let the Mittler Rebbe say Maimarim in jail because the doctors told the Russians that if he didn't say Maimarim, he would die. So they brought in Chassidim to his jail cell, and he would actually say Maimarim to them, and then they would leave. Also, while they were traveling, they let him say Maimarim. Because it was clear to them that if he didn't say Chassidus, they weren't sure that he could live. They didn't want him dying on their watch. So they actually brought Chassidim into the jail and let the Mittler Rebbe say Chassidus. So the day that he left the prison, he said a Maimer Poda besholom. That's also the pasuk that both he and the Alter Rebbe were saying when the Russians came into their cell and told them that they were free. Poda besholom nafshi mikravli ki berabim hayu imadi. That's why we have the song Poda besholom. We're going to sing a lot in Kislev, right? Kapitel Nun Hey in Tillim. So that song is for Yud Tes Kislev and Yud Tes Kislev because both Rabbeim were saying that pasuk when they were let out of jail, and therefore a lot of the Maimarim, all of the Maimarim, are based on that pasuk. The Mittler Rebbe was saying a Maimer on that pasuk when they let him out of jail. Right? Why was he saying on that pasuk? Because of his father. His father was let out of jail saying that pasuk. Okay, so Poda besholom. So now the pasuk itself is, we're going to see it right at the beginning of the Maimer. The pasuk itself is an interesting pasuk, and it seems to have certain contradictions, mineu bei, internal contradictions in the pasuk itself. And we'll see what the Rebbe is. The Rebbe here has an extremely unique understanding and explanation of Poda besholom. Our Rebbe has countless Poda besholom Maimarim. Almost every year, the Rebbe would say a Poda besholom Maimarim. Not every year, but there's many of them. This is one, said Tavshin Chav Beis, edited in Tavshin Nun Beis. So this was one of the last Maimarim the Rebbe edited. So this was Kislev Tavshin Nun Beis. And the Rebbe got sick in Adar Tavshin Nun Beis. Okay.
And they all have a relationship to each other?
Who?
Like a besholom miners. There's like several, yeah?
There's quite a few. Yeah. I mean, they all deal with the same basic issues, but this one has a very, very unique explanation of that issue, which will come up in Ois Gimel. We'll see it in Ois Gimel. But yes, they all have a connection. And they're all based on the Mittler Rebbe's Poda besholom, which the Rebbe is going to quote second line. Now, what was unique about that Shabbos? That Shabbos, you can see it says Shabbos Parshas V'Yetzeh Yud Kislev Maimer Gimel. third mimer. What do you mean mimer? Gimel. Generally in a Verbrengen, the Rebbe says one mimer. That Verbrengen, the Rebbe was talking about the fact that the Mittler Rebbe said Chassidus b'shufi. He just said Chassidus. The Mittler Rebbe could, well, he once said Chassidus for 16 hours straight. He just kept teaching Chassidus for 16 hours straight. It was common, he would say Chassidus for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. That was not uncommon. He just, sometimes the Rebbe would say it's a mimer in the morning, and it's all my marm, not sichos, my marm. Say a mimer in the morning, a mimer in the afternoon, and a mimer in the evening. Sometimes on Yom Kippur he would say a mimer. Yom Kippur was time on Yom Kippur for a mimer Chassidus, meaning you're busy davening all day. No, the Rebbe would say a mimer on Yom Kippur. So the Rebbe was talking about this, how the Mittler Rebbe just said my marim b'shufi, just with abundance, and that for bringing the Rebbe said 3 maimarim, Allah Mittler Rebbe. So the first mimer was explaining an inyan of the Mittler Rebbe's mimer Ata Echad, you're one, Shimcha Echad. The second mimer was connected to the mimer of his father-in-law, V'chol Benayach, which was mentioned, and it's going to be mentioned in this mimer. And the third mimer was this one, Poda besholom. The Rebbe said 3 mimer. Why? These are the sort of questions that Chassidim might ask, but we never know the answer. Okay, let's see. Poda besholom nafshi mikravli, ki berabim hayu imadi. Poda besholom. Redeemed in peace my nefesh, mikravli, from the battle that was to me. Ki berabim hayu imadi. Now, that's going to mean something very fascinating in this mimer, based on the Mittler Rebbe. But in simple pshat, it means that there were multitudes against me. Now, imadi also means with me, right? But simple pshat is there were multitudes against me, even though we're going to see that really it refers to the people of Avshalom who started to daven for, in pshat, it means the followers of Avshalom who started to daven for David HaMelech, even though Avshalom, David's son, was fighting his father. Yet Avshalom's backers were imadi, they were with me. Now, the Kibur Rabbi Mimadi, Hayu Imadi, seems to be the reason that Poda besholom. Now, Poda besholom also, if you just look at it clearly, Poda besholom mikrav, well, I understand. You redeem me in peace from a battle. Well, then that's not peace, that's a battle. At the end of the battle, I had peace, I understand, but the redemption wasn't peace. The redemption was battle. Right? So why does it say Poda besholom mikrav? Shalom means there was no krav, right? It means there was no battle. I understand there could be shalom after the battle, but then the Poda isn't besholom. The Poda might be l'shalom. You redeemed me to a state of peace from the battle, but what's Poda besholom? You redeemed me in peace, meaning you redeemed me in a peaceful way from the battle. But if it's a battle, it doesn't seem so peaceful. Okay, so we have to figure that out. And that's what all the Poda besholom maimarim are about. Right? Now, it's especially interesting relative to the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe saying this, Poda besholom, you redeemed me in peace. They've just been jailed by the Russians. That was anything but peaceful. Right? The Alter Rebbe was, his life was in serious danger. So why is that peaceful? And yet that's what he said when he left. Those are the psukim he was saying when he left. Okay. We'll figure it all out. Now, there's a number of points in this mimer that are in all of the Poda besholom maimarim. So I'll try to mention that any time you open up, especially the edited maimarim, there's an edited mimer in base. There's 2 or 3 other how did the edit my? I got sidetracked in terms of the edited maimarim just to make sure that we understand. Tafshin Mem Ches, so the Rebbe, Tafshin Mem Zayin and Mem Ches, so that's 1987-88. The Rebbe edited a number of maimarim. Those were put together in one volume. Now, there had already been a number of collected maimarim. They weren't necessarily edited, they had just been collected. And that was called Melukat. Maimar Melukatim, collected Maimarim. So that, I mean, anybody who has an old volume of that, so it doesn't have an aleph on it, because there wasn't a base. It was just, that was the only book, Melukat. In Tafshin Mem Zayin Mem Ches, after the Rebbe had edited Maimarim for the course of a year, almost two, but not every Shabbos, but every major day, so they put together those Maimarim in something called Maimar Melukatim Chelik Beis. So then in Tafshin Mem Tes, the Rebbe, again, the whole year, every major day we'd get a Maimar. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shabbos Shuvah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, Chav Cheshvan, the Yud Kislev, Tes Kislev, Yud Dalet Kislev, Yud Tes Kislev, Hanukkah. There would be Maimarim would come out, edited. So those were put in a book. That's Chelik Gimel. So Tafshin Mem Tes is Chelik Gimel. Tafshin Nun, 1990, that's Chelik Dalet. Tafshin Nun Aleph, that was Chelik Hey. Tafshin Nun Beis, that's the last Chelik, and that ends with the famous last Maimer of the Rebbe. It's not the last Maimer of the Rebbe. The Rebbe said the Maimer many years before, but it's the last edited Maimer of the Rebbe, Vata Tetzava. Famous Maimer. Purim, Mesiras Nefesh. And levels beyond. All right, so that's the last Maimer the Rebbe edited. Okay, so this Maimer also was we received this Maimer. Chassidim would go to shul, and this Maimer would be on the bima right before Tes Kislev, Yud Kislev, Yud Dalet Kislev. There should be a bunch of copies on the bima. Right, it would come out in New York. Obviously, it was sent here, copied here, and you'd get the copy. It'd be on the bima. It would look, it'd be like that. Right? You'd get it. It would look like that. A little pamphlet. It would say on the front, countries. It was very exciting. That's what people would spend the next couple of days learning, but then something else would come out a few days later. We were kept very busy trying to keep up.
Are there any handwritten versions in the Rebbe's languages of people studying?
Well, the Rebbe didn't write them down, but there are facsimiles of the Rebbe's notes on what Rav Yol wrote. Meaning Rav Yol would send it in typed, obviously, and the Rebbe would write on it and change it. So that there are facsimiles of that. It's around. There are a lot of Kisvei Yad in Moscow, in the library of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that didn't make it out. The part of the library that didn't make it out is mostly Kisvei Yad. The parts that did were the books. Books made it out, which is great. But when the Rebbe, actually it's interesting because Rosh Chodesh Kislev, of course, the Rebbe had a number of major heart attacks on Shmini Atzeres Tafshin Lamed Ches. And the Rebbe went home on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. I assume there will be a major for bringing here Monday night or Tuesday night, Rosh Chodesh Kislev. The Rebbe went home for the first time. He was in basically an intensive care unit in his office for those 30 some odd days. So the first time the Rebbe went out was not home on Chav Ches or Chav Tes Cheshvan, like around now. The Rebbe left 770, walked across just across the driveway into the library because certain books had come from Russia and the Rebbe wanted to see them. And so the Rebbe, evidently, who knows these things, right? But this is the word that we got, right? I wasn't there, but I wasn't watching. But the word we got was that the Rebbe was disappointed because they had left the books in boxes and they weren't really sorted so well. And the Rebbe was also disappointed because there were only books that weren't manuscripts. That's what the Rebbe was hoping would come out, the Kisvei Yad, because those are the things that's new Chassidus, never been printed. So they're still there. Putin's got them in the Lenin Library in Moscow. They took the whole Frierdiker Rebbe's library and put it in their library, claiming it was theirs. Brits, Russians, they're like this, So they finally did get out some of it. I hate to say this because I can't say I'm a big fan of the person, but you have to give credit where credit is due. Al Gore had a lot to do with getting some of it out, right? That when he was there as vice president, so he brought a bunch of books out in a diplomatic pouch. They were trying to get it out, but the Russians just, I don't know exactly what their thing is. Like, what do they care? It's just a Russian thing, you know. I don't know. It's in our library, and like anybody's looking at it in the library, I'm sure it's under lock and key. They won't let it out. Rabbi talked about it a lot. I try to get those books out, doing everything people can. Rabbi Kunin went with a couple of other people a number of times to try to get the books out. There were things other places, just an interesting story. I mean, it has nothing to do with the Russian books, but there were things, books in other places. With Gershom Melukat once told me that he was passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, but he was the Rebbe's first shaliach in Italy. So he was, basically the main shaliach in Italy. In other words, shaliachim all over. He was in Milan. And the Rebbe gave him a project, which was the Rebbe gave him the names of a number of, high-ranking. I don't know how you rank these people. Bishops and priests and things all over Italy, who had a lot of really interesting Jewish books that they had confiscated, that the church had taken, right? So he went to buy them from them. So he went around from place to place to buy them. And the Rebbe would tell him to go here, and he'd go, and he'd buy the book, and he'd send it to the Rebbe. And this for him he just loved doing this. Finally, he ran out. The list was over. So he decided he was going to go into the Vatican. So he went into the Vatican wearing a not tight shirt, a loose shirt. And he found some svarim and he put them in his shirt and he walked out. That was before beepers and all that stuff, right? So he sent him to the Rebbe, thinking the Rebbe's going to just be so excited and so happy that he did this, and it's, wow. So he got a package back with the books. And the Rebbe wrote, "I know where you got them, and they know where you got them. Put them back." That was the Rebbe's answer to him. So that wasn't on the list. The Rebbe didn't want those books yet. At some point, but not yet. But he just wanted to. He had finished his list. He was having such a good time. He told me how every time he was get so excited because he would give the Rebbe this thing, and he knew it was going to make the Rebbe happy, and he was so. But I know where you got them, and they know where you got them. Put them back. Such a line. That was all it said in the letter. Just that. Okay. Poda besholom nafshi mikravli. He redeemed my soul in peace from the battle that was to me. Now, krav, of course, is a certain type of battle. Krav miloshin kiruv. Milchama and krav are both war and battle, so you can differentiate between a battle as opposed to a war, right? Meaning the war obviously is more general, the battle is more specific, but you can also differentiate, and this is how it's differentiated often in Chassidus, is the battle is hand-to-hand up close, it's kiruv, and the milchama might be farther away, you're throwing things at them. Avnei blistarayos is what Chazal call them, when they're catapulting rocks and stuff. Right, so now it's called RPGs and things like that. Right? Okay. Anti-tank missiles and stuff like that. Right. Rarely does a soldier. Well, it depends on the type of combat. I mean, right now there's a lot of krav in Gaza, but rarely does a soldier see who he kills if he kills someone. Right? It's usually not that close. Sometimes it is. There was an amazing story this last week. We heard it because it happened to the unit of the husband of a friend of our daughter. So they were sitting down and eating lunch just outside Gaza, and some soldiers, and one of them was sort of looking at his gun, and a bullet was pulled from his gun, flew out of his gun, which is really like, prohibition number one, right? Even that never happened to me, right? Like that was, even I managed to keep my bullets in my gun. So this was like very serious. So they all jumped up, thinking someone was shooting at them. He said, no, it was me. So then they went around to see if anybody was hurt. Sure enough, Hamasnik had just come out of a tunnel with an RPG in his hand, ready to get them, and he had a bullet in his forehead. This guy was piling from his gun. He did not mean to shoot anybody. He was just checking his gun, and a bullet flew out.
I read about it.
Yeah. So it was in the unit of it's a true story, because we got the story from our daughter's friend, whose husband was sitting there. They were just, whoa. This guy they were dead. This guy was going to kill them in a second. He had a grenade. He was going to throw it at them, and that was the end of them.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, it's like wild. It's just wild, some of the things that happen. So anyway, that's called Krav. They saw him. Poda, besholom, nashim, Krav, likibirabim, hayu imodi. Umavar bala geula. The Bala Geula, the one whose day of redemption it is, meaning the Mitla Rebbe. But Ma'amar Dibra Maskal Zel, his mimer with this Dibra Maskal, with this heading, Poda besholom, Shenitfas besifrei Sharei Tshuva, that's printed in his book, Sharei Tshuva. So if you want to find the Mitla Rebbe's Poda besholom, you'll find it in a sefer called Sharei Tshuva, which I assume we have a copy in some. Mitla Rebbe's Chassidus is very, 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 very difficult. Because he says Chassidus, you could say Chassidus for hours, and so it's hard to follow, because he'll go back to the beginning, and then the Rebbe Shab sort of took the Frierdiker Rebbe and ordered him. The Mitla Rebbe. I heard a story. I'll tell you a story about the Mitla Rebbe, because it's important to know these things. The Mitla Rebbe called his Chassid, and this is a story written by someone named Yaakov Kadner. Yaakov Kadner was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe and the Mitla Rebbe, and he wrote down a number of stories that he himself saw with his own eyes, and it's in a sefer that you can buy. And the store, I think they have it in Heichel Menachem, called Sipurim Nifloim, wondrous stories. So there's some amazing stories in there of that time from the Alter Rebbe and the Mitla Rebbe. So Alter Rebbe passed away in 1812, 1813. Running away from Napoleon. So the Mitla Rebbe called some Chassidim and out to the field, and they went in some carriages, and they got out of the carriages and they stood in a field, and the Mitla Rebbe said Chassidus. This is the very beginning of the Mitla Rebbe being Rebbe. He said Chassidus for about 5-6 hours in the field. Now when he did that often, his brother would lean over so the Rebbe could lean on him. So his brother would lean over, and the Rebbe would be leaning, and he would do that for 4, 5, 6 hours. So the Rebbe said Chassidus for a very, very long time. And then they went to some inn, and the Rebbe went to his room, and the Chassidim, Yaakov Kadner says, the Chassidim were in these inns had these common rooms, right? We'd call it a lobby, but it was much more than a lobby. They would eat there. That's where the food was served, and that's where people would sit around, and it was called a Beit Marzeach, right? It was the locals would come in and drink. Some people would stay. It was the inn. The local inn was a very important part of the town. So there were inns where Jews used to gather, and generally those inns would be run by Jews, and there was kosher food, etc. So they stayed in one of these inns, and they were all sitting in the common room discussing the mimer they had just heard and how amazing it was and incredible. And they were discussing whether or not the Chassidus they just heard from the son of the Alter Rebbe was greater than the Chassidus they heard from his father. That was the discussion. It's an interesting discussion. So all of a sudden the Shamash of the Rebbe came to Rav Yaakov Kadner, the author of the book and the author of the story, and said, "Come with me." So he went with him. He took him to the Rebbe's room, where the Mitla Rebbe was. The door was open, and he said, "Come." And he walked towards the door, and he saw that the Mitla Rebbe was standing in the middle of the room looking at the door. So he jumped back. He didn't want to bother the Rebbe. And the Shamash said, "No, he can't see you. Don't worry about it." So he stood at the door and he watched the Rebbe for a few hours. This is nighttime. Then the Rebbe turned around, walked towards the wall, stood facing the wall. Once the Rebbe was facing the wall, so now we can only see the back of the Rebbe. He said he got tired. It was already the middle of the night. He'd been watching the Rebbe for a few hours. He was tired and he went to sleep. He got up in the morning and he asked the Shamash, what happened next? So he said, well, the Rebbe stood against the wall for a few hours. And then he turned around with a big smile on his face, clapped his hands, and said, I'd like something to eat. And he was clearly in tremendous simcha. So the Shamash asked the Rebbe, why is the Rebbe in such simcha? So the Mittler Rebbe said, when I was standing in the middle of the room, I was saying the mimer to my father. The mimer I said today, I was saying to my father. My father got great joy from it. He asked me to say it to the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. When I was standing against the wall, I was saying the mimer to my father, the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. And they turned to my father and said, you should have great nachas. So I'm very happy. That was the Mittler Rebbe. V'choyves ha-nahar, he's called. Bina. He took the chokhmah, the nekuda, the point of the Alter Rebbe, and spread it out. V'choyves ha-nahar, Bina, the breadth of the river. Taking the underground source and spreading it. So that's the Mittler Rebbe. Very, very, they say, the Chassidim used to say that if you cut the Mittler Rebbe, it wouldn't bleed blood, he'd bleed Chassidus. Da'atam al zeh, that the reason shemilchama nikras b'shem krav, that this milchama, this war is called krav, miloshen kiruv, from a language of closeness, even though the whole notion of milchama is the opposite of closeness, even though people might be in close physical proximity, they're obviously very far from each other, and for that reason they're having a war. If they felt a closeness, they wouldn't be at war. The notion of a milchama is that each one of the lechamim, of the warriors, wants to defeat the second. Netzach is victory. I mean, it's emerge victorious, but in this context it would be defeat. And to subdue him, that he will become contained in him. In other words, A will somehow swallow up B, so B will be completely subdued and become part of A. So certainly when you're talking about territory, that's very often what war is about, right? Interesting enough, the war we're in right now has nothing to do with that, right? Not interested in that territory in the least, right? Soon, hopefully they're going to take it all over, get rid of these guys, and whether right or wrong, what they're going to do is give it back, right? They're not staying there. The Israeli army is not staying in that place, right? Okay, whether that's right or wrong is a separate issue, but this usually wars are about conquering land. This is not about conquering land. It has nothing to do with it. But most wars are. They leave me. Their war is. Their war is about conquering land. Ours isn't. And in order to bring this about, that he's fighting against him such that he should become incorporated in him. In other words, the victor should vanquish the defeated and take over the defeated. And the defeated will now become him. So what's Putin interested in? That Ukraine will be included in Russia. Right? That's what his war is about. Hu davka yedei akiruv shemiskarev elav. This is specifically through being close to him that he's approaching him, krav miloshin kiruv, because he's not trying to destroy him from afar. He's trying to take him over, trying to envelop him. Oh, so then there has to be a certain closeness. That's in war, right? I can't take over a country without ultimately at some point sending ground troops in to take over the territory. Right? I can bomb them from afar for a period of time, but at some point I'm going to have to move in and take over the area in order that it becomes mine, so to speak. And that's the krav, that's the kiruv of it. So there's milchama from afar and there's milchama from close. Today, the distinction between those two is much greater than it used to be. There wasn't, how far away could you be when you were fighting in the old days, right? But now, I think at some point we're going to blow up someone in Taiman, in Yemen. At some point. Not in a hurry to do it, but at some point these guys are going to get it. Okay, well, we're not interested in Taiman. We're not going to go there. We're not sending soldiers there. We're going to bomb them from afar, wipe out a few, say, look, just stop doing this. If you don't stop doing this, we're going to obliterate you. And then, so, that'll be the end of that. Right? Not interested in taking it over. That's not a krav. That's a milchama. It's not even, it's barely a milchama. It's just, leave us alone. But milchama is you want to take it over. A krav is you want to take it over. Temporarily, permanently, whatever it happens to be. Miloshin kiruv. Oh, so now what's that in Avodah? There's a war in Avodah between the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis. Between the godly soul and the animal soul. What is that? Valderech sel b'milchama the Nefesh Elokis, the Nefesh Bahamis. This is all what the Mitla Rabbi describes. Because obviously, David HaMelech, what's David HaMelech talking about? Obviously, David HaMelech is talking about a physical conflict that he had with his son Absalom. He's also talking about Panemius. This is Tehillim. It's David HaMelech. Valderech zel b'milchama the Nefesh Elokis v'Nefesh Bahamis. So too regarding the milchama, the war between the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis. That war also can have a bechinas krav or not. Can be close combat, or so to speak, combat from afar. What does that mean? The ikra milchama, the essence of that milchama. This is all what the Mitla Rabbi says. Even though the Rebbe is going to take us to different places in understanding Poda besholom, but this idea is brought up very often in the Maimarim of Poda besholom. What's the krav in our Veda? He b'shas tefillah, time of davening. Why? What does it say in the Zohar? Shas Sleisa, Shas Krova. The time of davening, it's a time of battle. But Dafka Krova. Why? So Rabbi will explain. Shebechdei Shavoida, in order that the Avodah, Tefillah, the Nefesh Elokis, Tifo will affect the Nefesh Bahamis, Shatuchlal b'Nefesh Elokis, that the Nefesh Bahamis will become incorporated into the Nefesh Elokis. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean the ultimate incorporation of Nefesh Bahamis and Nefesh Elokis is a tzaddik. Okay, but we're not talking about that. We're talking simply about the Nefesh Bahamis. We'll see in the next in the parentheses. The Nefesh Bahamis becoming a kli, a vehicle for the expression of the Nefesh Elokis. But what does that mean? So the Rebbe says in the brackets. It's actually brackets. Hainu, shegam nefesh bahamis tielei avas Hashem. That also the nefesh bahamis will have love for Hashem. We'll talk about that in a second. B'chol levavcha, with all your heart. B'shnei yitzrecha. The pasuk says, a pasuk that I hope you know because you say it constantly. V'ahavtas Hashem elokecha b'chol levavcha. You should love God with all your heart. B'chol nafshcha b'chol me'edecha. B'chol levavcha, of course, is a rather strange word because really it should say b'chol libcha, because a lev is a heart. What's levav? No, two hearts. Rashi and Chumash, right? Rashi and Devarim. Shnei yitzrecha, both two bases or two yitzurs. In other words, your nefesh elokis and your nefesh bahamis should both love God. Now, how does my nefesh bahamis love God? My nefesh bahamis, I thought my nefesh bahamis is a complete low life, and all he's interested in is drinking beer and burping. Right? And the Mets. Oh, I got the dog. Right? The Springboks. Who cares? Okay. So the Nefesh Bahamis is interested in Gashmias. Right? No. Depends on the Nefesh Bahamis. What's Nefesh Bahamis? Nefesh Bahamis is conscious you and me. That person you refer to as I. Who is that? That experience that you have of I. I feel my toe. I feel sad. I feel glad. I don't know. Go ask your dad. Right? That, all those feelings. Who is that? That's my Nefesh Bahamis. My Nefesh Bahamis is the experience of me. So you'll call that, in more sophisticated terms, conscious you and me. It's my Nefesh Abamis. Right? There's a deeper you and me, which is our Nefesh Elokis. Nefesh Abamis is only around for a relatively short period of time. While you're down here in Eilam Hazeh, you have a Nefesh Abamis. You also have a Nefesh Elokis. You also have a godly soul. That godly soul existed before, and it also exists after. Right? We don't want to go anywhere. We like it down here. We want to stay down here. We want Mashiach to come and live forever. Okay, fine. Until this generation. What happened? People would come into Eilam Hazeh, they'd spend some time here, and they'd leave. Okay, where were they before? Their soul was above. Wherever it was. Atzilus, Bria, wherever it was. That soul came down into a body, spent 120 years vargeling around in Eilam Hazeh, right, trying to figure out how to run a business and keep Shabbos and do all that. Okay, and it was encountering a Nefesh Abamis, which was the animal soul, which is the source of the conscious reality of that human down here in Eilam Hazeh. And then that human passed away at the ripe old age of 120. So what passed away, so to speak? The goof and the Nefesh Abamis. Nothing happened to the Neshama. The Neshama went back up to where it came from. Didn't die. Neshamas don't die. That's why we don't say Jews died. We don't talk about death of a Jew. We talk about a passing. They passed from one place to another place. Niftar. Histalek. They were elevated. Right? The soul left the body and went back to where it was. So who am I really? Who was I before I showed up here? Not me, because I don't want to leave. Who? Reuven. Reuven was around 500 years ago. Who was Reuven before he showed up in wherever he showed up 500 years ago? He was a neshama above. Reuven spent 80 years in Eilam Hazeh. Right? Fine. And then where did Reuven go? Back to the same place. So who's Reuven? You're going to define Reuven by that 80 years? You're going to define Reuven by the hundreds and hundreds of years before and the couple of hundred years already after. That's Reuven. So Reuven really is. It happens to be that down here we'll also discuss Reuven down here and the mark Reuven made down here and what he did down here and the books he wrote or the books he didn't write or whatever Reuven did. I mean, if we know about Reuven, he must have done something because he lived 300 years ago, 500 years ago. If he didn't do anything of great import, so then we probably won't have heard of him. That doesn't mean he wasn't an amazing guy and an important guy and did amazing things, but we probably won't hear of him because he didn't do anything that was unique. Just did good stuff like everybody else. Okay, so then who's Reuven? I don't know. Well, some guy. Reuven has Jewish descendants, though, who are down here doing all sorts of stuff now. Right? Okay, good. So who's Reuven? Yeah, he's Nefesh Elokis. That's real Reuven. Who's conscious Reuven? While Reuven is in Eilam Hazeh, he has this thing called the Nefesh Abamis, and that Nefesh Abamis is Reuven's experience of Reuven in Eilam Hazeh. Amazing experience. Is it bad? Is that bad? The Abishah gives us that experience. Now, that experience can be expressed in unbelievably negative and horrid ways. There's no doubt about that. It can also be expressed in unbelievably positive and holy ways. It's all up to Reuven. So what are we trying to do? What's life all about? Ultimately, is getting Reuven to appreciate Elokus. Which Reuven? His Nefesh Abamis. His Nefesh Elokis already appreciates Elokus. You don't have to get your Nefesh Elokis from. Your Nefesh Elokis loves God. How about your Nefesh Abamis? Naturally, it doesn't love God. Naturally, it loves itself. That's its natural state. If it's worked on and elevated and illuminated and educated, so it can come to an appreciation of Elokus. But that's a battle. Why? Because I have to encounter the Nefesh Abamis directly. And what's the most powerful expression of that battle? Davening. Because who's davening? I'm davening. Who's I? My Nefesh Abamis. I have to get my Nefesh Abamis to tell God that I think God is wonderful, incredible, amazing, and I love Him. And my Nefesh Abamis might want breakfast. Isn't that interesting? Okay, I'll say the words. Why? Because my Nefesh Abamis might feel guilty if I don't say the words. And it doesn't like feeling guilty. So to say the words. What's that got to do with davening? Right? That's why davening is the hardest thing we do. It's what most people find. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. It could be enjoyable, but it's probably, Yiddishkeit would be relatively easy if it weren't for davening. It's not so hard to keep Shabbos. Once you've kept it, like, why would you ever think of not? Right? What would a week be without Shabbos? Right? Making Kiddush, that's nice. Kiddush Friday night is it's an uplifting thing. It's a beautiful thing. Right? Putting on tefillin. Put on tefillin, say Christ. Put on tefillin, say, put on talis, put on tefillin, say Kriya Shema, and take them off. It'd be so hard. Would you have a hard time focusing on the words of Kriya Shema? Well, probably not. Davening. A battle. Right? They say that there was a Chassidus Rav who said this. I think it might have been the Tzanzer. He said, sometimes when I daven, I have only one machshava zara. I have only one foreign thought. But sometimes if I daven better, I have two foreign thoughts. If I daven really well, I have three foreign thoughts. So his Chassidim couldn't understand what he was talking about. It seems like that would be the opposite. He said, no. When I don't daven so well, I have one foreign thought. From the beginning of davening to the end of davening, it's one long foreign thought. So when I daven a little better, so I might actually think about a Kadosh Baruch in the middle of davening. So I have a foreign thought before, then I think about God a little bit, and then I have a foreign thought afterwards. So when I really daven well, I might even think about God twice in the middle of davening. So I have a foreign thought, then I think about God a little bit, then another foreign thought, then I think about God a little more, and then okay, we all smile when we hear that, and we giggle, and we go, oh yeah, okay, that's my chakras. Okay, it's a battle. Davening is very difficult. To get the nefesh, why? Because there's no props. Putting on tefillin is not difficult. Putting on tefillin is nice. There's something to do, and there's a prop, and you can connect to it, and it's uplifting, and okay, so you might do it without thinking, you might do it with thinking, but it's not a difficult thing to do properly. You put it in the right place in the arm, in the right place in the head, and you're done. Davening, I have to get my nefesh b'hamis to express its love for Kadosh Baruch Hu, because there's no props. It's just me and my nefesh b'hamis. It's not very easy. That's a krav. Why? So let's see how the Rabbi describes that. I have to be able to say, I love God. Who's I? My nefesh b'hamis. My nefesh elokis loves God. Do I love God? Told you the story a number of times. Once teaching a Chassidus, I used to teach Chassidus every morning in a shul, in the Viber shul, in the women's section of that shul. There was someone who was a very, very special Jew who was writing a Sefer Torah, and he would listen. He came out when we were talking about Ahavas Hashem. He came out and said, "I know I don't love God, and I guess I don't want to love God, because if I really wanted to, I probably would, because I usually get what I want. But I want to love God." Oh, that's a good place to be. Meaning it's better to want to love God, and it's even better to love God, but at least he wants to want to love God. He does. That's what he wants. He's finding it hard to overcome all the distractions. And I say, okay, say. So how do we come to this state of love? Hu al yedei shenefesh elokis mislaveshes benefesh habahamis. That the nefesh elokis is clothed in the nefesh habahamis. What does that mean? So the Rabbi is going to explain. Now, what is a lavush? A lavush is a means of expression. That's a lavush. That's why the Baal Tanya in the third parak of Tanya talks about the gimel lavushim, thought, speech, and action. How does the nefesh express itself? It thinks, it speaks, it does. It doesn't do anything else. You'll say it emotes. Well, okay, but that's not a lavush. That's the nefesh itself. And what do you have to do relative? You have to think about that emotion. Now that emotion becomes part of conscious you. You might be having that emotion. It's just not part of conscious. If you're not thinking about it, so then it's not relevant to you at this particular moment. Right? If you're not thinking about something, you're not aware of it, so then it's not happening to you. Well, it is happening to you on some level. It's just you're not conscious of it. Okay, we've all when you're building something or something, you banged yourself and you were so busy you didn't even notice, and then 20 minutes later you notice that there's blood on your shirt. You go, where did the blood come from? You look at your finger's bleeding. So when did I hit my finger? Why is my finger bleeding? What happened? Now you're conscious of your finger bleeding. Does it hurt? Oh, yes or no. It obviously didn't hurt before. Right? Was it sending impulses to your brain? I hurt. It might have been, but you were too busy to pay attention to them. You weren't thinking about them. Now you're thinking about them. The person faints because he can't stand blood. Okay. Right. Thought, speech, and action. Those are the three expressions of conscious you and me. I'm either thinking about something, speaking about something, or doing something. Or all three at once. Hopefully the same thing. Right. Okay. Those are levushi. So when the soul, nefesh elokis, clothes itself in the nefesh bahamis, it means it gets the nefesh bahamis to express the nefesh elokis. And that's a battle. She's beinanus shel nefesh elokis. So in order to do that, how does a person do that? That the beinanus, the meditation of the nefesh elokis, that which the nefesh elokis gets the nefesh bahamis to think about. Hi binyonim ke'elu, are regarding things, matters, uba'ofen, and in a way, shegam nefesh bahamis yichelu lasig, that also the nefesh bahamis can understand. In other words, what generally in Chassidus, what's the first level of his beinanus in Chassidus? When we start learning Chassidus, what do we learn about? First, ki hu chayecha. He's the source of your life. Why? Because I'm into my life. What does my nefesh bahamis appreciate? Me. So talk about me being sourced in God, and my nefesh bahamis will appreciate that. My nefesh bahamis doesn't want to hear about lofty levels of godliness that are completely transcendent to physical reality and not a source of physical reality. He's not interested in that yet. Yet he will be. At one point he will be. But at the beginning, what do you start talking about? God is the source of you. Oh, I can relate to me. What, God's the source of that? Oh, cool. I like him. Because he gives me me. And I like me. So I like him. Because he's me. Well, he's not me, but he's the reason for me. Okay, but that's, I'm turning it into something silly, but it's actually a very deep, he's beinanus. He's the source of your life. What did we just learn in V'yadaita Moskva? That your experience of your own existence is a revelation of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Ki hu chayecho. And I can relate to that because I can relate to my own existence. What about levels of godly reality that are completely and totally transcendent? I might not be interested at first. Well, if I don't have a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm not going to want to talk about that. Because it has nothing to do with me. And I want to talk about me. So I'll talk about the Eibishter as he relates to me. So that's what the Rabbi says, Be'inyonim ke'elu, those ideas, uba'ofen, and in a way that it's also relative to me and relevant to me. And not in some transcendent way, so I'll talk about godly energy in such a way that I can't relate to it. No, it has to be something I can relate to. Something I can relate to in terms of my own existence. What did Rabbi Shab do in the Maimer we just finished? He spent most of the time talking about education. Right? How a teacher and a student relate to each other, and what the experience of the student, the experience of the teacher, things that we can all relate to. We all understand. It's part of our everyday existence at some point in our lives. So the Hizbeinanus has to be, in order to get my nefesh bahamis to also daven. I was going to talk about a level of davening that theoretically my nefesh bahamis isn't involved. It's just some sort of revelation of the nefesh elokis. Okay, that's very, very nice, but it's not affecting my nefesh bahamis. In order to get the nefesh bahamis involved, I have to think about elokus in a way that the nefesh bahamis can appreciate it. And the nefesh bahamis has seichel. Nefesh bahamis isn't dumb. Human intellect is nefesh bahamis. Seichel enoshi. So nefesh bahamis. Nefesh bahamis figured this thing out. That's pretty smart. Nefesh bahamis figures out, and I decide, unfortunately, it's such a horrible thing to have to figure out. But Nefesh bahamis figured out Within a second of them throwing that rocket, a siren goes off in different places in there, so they know exactly where that thing is going right away. How do they? We just take it for granted. How do they know that? How do they figure? I mean, they figured it out, but how do they figure that out? It might even be relatively easy. I don't know. I find it astounding. So my phone will go woo, 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 and anything is headed towards Lud, Rishon LeZion, Tel Aviv, Haifa, or Tzfas. Or Yerushalayim, but Yerushalayim has been pretty quiet, right? But those other places, unfortunately, they've been every now and then this thing makes noise. Why? I have kids there. So I want to know if something's happening. So then you get on the family WhatsApp, everybody okay? Question mark. And then when everybody's okay, they say, yes, yes, Baruch Hashem. And then Abba and Ima are calm. Okay. But what's really astounding, how do they know? They give everybody, not everybody, it depends where you are, but in most places it's a minute and a half to get to the Baal Shelter. Because the thing takes a minute and a half to get there. That means they know right away where it's going. How do they know that? They also know right away which ones to knock down and which ones to let fall, because this one's going into the sea. They don't even shoot that one down. Why waste a Yerut on that? Like it's not shy. They know when they're going to fall in empty areas. Somebody's going to fall in the middle of a field, they just let it fall and blow up in the middle of the field. Not worth shooting a rocket at it. But something that's going towards houses, so they shoot those ones down. How do they know this right away? Human intellect is very, very impressive. It's much more impressive than the guys shooting the rockets. They're just like shooting them into nowhere. Right? I mean, they had to have enough seichel to figure out how to make a rocket. Okay, say that I couldn't make a rocket. I don't know how to make a rocket. But the guys shooting them down, that's like much more so. It's unbelievable. It's astounding. Okay, that's human intellect. So that same human intellect can come to an appreciation of Elokus. That same human intellect can learn Chassidus instead of learning. I can learn physics too, no problem. I can also learn Chassidus. Right? Learn metaphysics instead of just physics. Right? And understand unbelievable things about the Eibishter. Okay, but the first thing that Nefesh Abamis is going to want to understand is a level of Elokus that's relevant to me because I'm interested in me. I want to know how God makes my life better. That's the first step anybody's going to take. At a certain point, hopefully, the person transcends that and gets to a point where they appreciate, maybe it's not about me, maybe it's about him, maybe it's not about how God makes my life better, but how I can do more to express what God wants and what God's all about. That's the next step. That might be a few steps, but that's where a person wants to get. But the beginning of it all is, let's put God in orbit around me and my life. Where does he fit? Okay. That's good. If he wasn't there, so that's amazing. It's incredible. It's not where I want to end up. I want to end up orbiting around him instead of having him orbit around me with all the other stuff. It's like, okay? Let's just finish the paragraph. When the tefillah is just an expression of the neshama itself, there's no nefesh b'amis in there, there's just we'll see this later in the mimer, just an expression of, from above, below, an arousal of the neshama, ain't a pale is b'nefesh b'amis. It doesn't affect the nefesh b'amis. That doesn't mean it's not a beautiful thing, and it might be an incredibly pleasant experience for the person, but it's temporary, and it won't affect the nefesh b'amis. Like, states of inspiration. States of inspiration are very, very nice, but they don't affect me. Yeah, usually after a state of inspiration end up back exactly where I was when the inspiration disappears. I have to invest that inspiration in changing my nefesh abamis, as opposed to just feeling inspired. Right? In physicalities, all of a sudden I feel tremendous energy. Unbelievable energy, and I'm just doing so many stuff. Great, okay, good. If I want to invest that energy in Gashmias, Mamish Gashmias, not in terms of what I'm accomplishing with that energy, just in Gashmiastic energy. I want more energy, so probably the best thing to do with this energy is do some reasonable exercise for where you are right now in your physical being. Don't overdo it, because that's going to be bad for you, right? And make a regimen get inspired to make a regimen of education, of exercise, so that you will slowly but surely have more and more energy because you're in better and better shape. That's the reasonable way to use that physical energy in long term. Okay, right now, go exercise for 10 minutes and make this something that you do 3 times a week. Okay, take that inspiration and invest it. Then you'll be energized. In another couple of months, this level of energy will be more common. Just have the energy for the couple hours you have it, and then disappears. It disappeared. Nothing happened. It was there. It disappeared, and you're exactly where you were before. No. Why not work on your heart-lung rate so you'll actually be in better shape? You'll have more energy. Feel more alert. Take this inspiration and invest it in 3 times a week, 15 minutes. Oh, okay. So Torah things, same thing. All excited about doing something. Okay, now what? The 67 wars. So the Rebbe was Hisarus similar to the Hisarus we're seeing now. That unbelievable. And they just heard a story about some Lubavitchers who they filled up their car. They heard some people were in a certain place. They filled up their car with a bunch of stuff to give them. They asked for it to fill in and all sorts of things in Ruchnius. So they drove to that place. They weren't there. So they said, well, they must have gone south. So they drove down to Aza. They just drove further south. And they got to a roadblock. And there was a soldier at the road, a chayalit. And they said, we're Chabad. We're bringing stuff for some soldiers. If there's stuff for some soldiers. She said, look, I have to talk to my commanding officer. I can't let you through. You can talk to him. So he comes. He sees the car and he says, first things first. I have to put on tefillin. He doesn't say anything to them. He just says, I have to put on tefillin. So the guy gets out of his car, wraps up the officer with tefillin. He says, okay. Now what? He says, what's the deal? Explains the deal. Okay. Set up a table right here. Every single soldier that goes past this point isn't allowed past unless he puts on tefillin. This just happened last week, 2 weeks ago. He's asked to put on tefillin. Right? So, can't figure out what, so I asked the guy, where did you come from? Who are you? What do you, right? So he said, when I was a kid, I learned in the Beit Sefer L'Malacha. He learned in the, I don't know what's Beit Sefer L'Malacha in English, I don't know, but there was a school in Kfar Chabad where many kids went to, mostly Sfardim from traditional families who wanted their kids to get a certain Jewish education, but also wanted them to get some sort of trade. And it was called the trade school. It's called the trade school. That's what it was called. So they went to the Beit Sefer L'Malacha. And this guy went. He was like, 45, this guy. He went. So he's always remembered it. No yarmulke. Made every soldier going by put on tefillin. They set up right there. Who are you? So that's out there. So in 67, things like this were happening because of a great victory, unfortunately, not because of a great tragedy. And Chaim Gutnick from Australia said he had Yechidus with the Rabbi, and the Rabbi said, go home and tell people that this Hisarus is very nice, this excitement is very good, and it's amazing and it's incredible, but they have to start putting on tefillin and keeping Shabbos. Excitement and inspiration isn't enough, because it will wear off. 67 didn't take long to wear off. By 73, it was gone completely. That was a mashber. It was a serious mashber. Probably the country never is recovering from that mashber. So, anyway. No, we should only hear good news. Gedalia.